Good day, Tony. It's a pleasure to have you here. You came in early. And Tony, it seems that it's only on Electoral College doing with Jam now. What's going on, my brother?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to class once again. My name is Adeshola Aladeshawe. I will be your moderator for this evening's class. I'd like to say thank you for making time out this Sunday evening, raining Sunday evening. We'd also like to implore our students to please nudge your classmates to come into class. We are going to start in earnest in about 5 minutes, but I'll take this time to reiterate some of our housekeeping rules, which is when you come into class, please ensure you place your names in the chat box, your full names as you would like to see them on your certificates, and the pseudo-political parties that you represent within the college. Also, this class should run for a maximum of about an hour, 30 minutes. Our facilitator, I could see him, he's well in class. So we'll take his session. He will walk us through the program or his class, which is on democracy and citizens participation this evening. And after which, if we have questions or if there are questions that pop up in your mind as the classes go on, you can write them down in the chat box. And after that, we will take the questions. Or you can wait till after, and then I would let you indicate via the use of emojis by raising up your virtual hands, and then I will call you up to ask your questions. Okay? So without wasting much of our time, this is just a minute past 5. Please nudge your classmates to come in. And whilst you're doing that, I will take this time to read the bio of our faculty and our facilitator for this evening. This evening, we will be having a renowned communications expert and a social commentator. He is the founder of Uburu, a Nigerian-based marketing communications consultancy that provides services to individuals, businesses, and governments across West Africa. He's also an advocate of good governance and civic responsibility. He's the convener of I Am Edo, a movement of young Edo professionals, which seeks to inspire pride and patriotism in all people of the Edo heritage. I'm particularly interested because there's a lot of conversation about Edo State and the elections coming up pretty soon. So I'm sure you have questions too in your mind. I'm not saying you're asking questions about the political issues going on, but I'm sure our faculty or our facilitator today will have one or two things to say, and we can engage his mind on Edo State and on citizens' participation basically this evening. So without further ado, let's put our hands together as we welcome Mr. Tony Usidaman, who is our facilitator for this evening to take us on democracy and citizens' participation. Please ensure that you engage him with questions because this is key. The office of the citizen is the most important office. So let's bombard him and let's have a good time. It's over to you, sir. You have the virtual lectern.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please confirm if you can hear me well by a show of hands. And if at any point my connection isn't clear, please also indicate in the chat box so that I can maybe change my internet source for better connection. I would like this class to be as engaging as possible. During the presentation, we might not be able to take questions, but please note down, questions. And then at the end, I will attempt to answer some of these questions. Let me say that I am not an expert in democracy matters. I am just like you, someone who is very, very interested in, how systems work, democratic systems work, and the role that ordinary people can play within those democratic systems. So, like I said, please note your questions, comments at the end of the day, and then we can disagree on, ideas expressed here. Like I said, I do not have a monopoly of knowledge. It's when we have, divergent views. That's how we grow as a people. So there will be a chance for you to express yourself at the end of the presentation. I see a raised hand, Abib Wale Aziz. Would you like to say something before we go on? You can't hear me, or what? Could you indicate? Maybe in the chat box.
No, I think you had indicated that if they can't hear you,
okay.
They should indicate by raising their hand. So that's what they do. Yes.
So does that mean you can't hear me, Aziz?
Oh no, you're very audible.
What is the verdict? Everyone can hear me. Okay, good. So let's dive into the presentation now. I will share my screen so that you can all see. Okay. So as we know, the topic we will be discussing is, sorry, one second. Is democracy and citizen participation. You already know my name, Tony Usidamen. A brief outline of our class today. We'll be looking at the different forms of government. We'll start with anarchism, and then we look at autocracy, oligarchy, and of course, democracy. And then we will delve deeper into the meaning of democracy and the variants of democracy, the challenges of democracy, and finally, the concept of citizenship. We will look at citizens as users and consumers, and citizens as shapers and makers. We'll also explore issues in modern day citizenship and how to build an active citizenry. So to the what government is. In simple terms, government is the body with the power to make and enforce laws to control a country, a land area, a people, or an organization. I'll go over that again. A government is the body saddled with the responsibility to make laws, make and enforce laws to control a country, a land area, a people, or an organization. So most times when we talk about government, most people usually think of a geographical territory, like, states. But the concept of government extends beyond just geographical regions, such that even in corporate establishments, you have government, which is why we have terms like corporate governance. I'm sure those of us who work in the corporate world are familiar with the term corporate governance. This is to show that even within businesses, forms of government exist. So government isn't just about making and enforcing laws for countries or land areas. It is also about organizations as well. I just thought it's important to have that broad understanding of what government is. And most societies agree that the existence of government is morally justified. Now, let's look at the various types of government that we have. The first we're going to look at is anarchism. And anarchism simply means rule by none. I mean, if you think about it, is it possible for a society to actually exist without some form of leadership, some form of rulership? Technically, it would seem like no will be the obvious answer. But then again, in certain societies, we see semblances of what you could call anarchism, which is a society without a publicly enforced government or political authority. I will tell you why these is important as we go on to look at the other forms of government. But just keep in mind that anarchism is technically rule by none. and that is a society without a publicly enforced government or political authority. Now, the second type of government that we'll be looking at is autocracy. An autocracy simply means rule by one. Rule by one. It's a system of government in which supreme power is concentrated in the hands of one person or polity, such as you have in absolute monarchies in Saudi Arabia, in Brunei, in Oman, in the UAE, and dictatorships, such as you have in North Korea. Those are examples of autocratic government where power is vested on an individual or a polity. And then we have another type of government called oligarchy. And oligarchy, following the same trend as the previous two, means rule by the few, rule by the few, rule of the few. It's a form of power structure in which power rests with a small number of people. And there are various forms of practice of oligarchy. An example is the aristocracy. And aristocracy basically means rule by the nobility. So when you have the queen or the king, we have a king in England now. That is an example of an aristocratic government. It is ruled by the nobility. It's almost what we have in some places within Nigeria, where you have chiefs and obis or emirs presiding over, or obas presiding over areas. And in that kind of government, power usually passes from one person in the family to another, and not to people outside of that noble family. So aristocracy is a form of oligarchy. There's also the plutocracy, which is a form of oligarchy. Plutocracy simply means rule by the wealthy. So where the rich people in the society are the ones making laws and dictating how things should be run within a system, that type of government is referred to as a plutocracy. And that there is the meritocracy, another form of oligarchy, which is ruled by the meritorious, simply means the most intelligent amongst us. So if there are renowned scientists, renowned engineers, renowned bankers, and we vest power or authority to administer a people to those few people, that is what is referred to as meritocracy. There is also another popular form of oligarchy, which is called the theocracy. Theocracy technically means rule by God. However, you find that some person acts as proxy. So some person exercises that power on behalf of a divine being, God. And there's usually little or no interference from any external party, and there are no internal mechanisms of control outside of that person or those groups of people. So those are the various expressions of oligarchy as a type of government. And that leads us to democracy, which, as in following with the trend, is a government ruled by the majority, simply a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We will delve deeper into democracy next. So far, can we indicate if we are together or if I have lost you? Are we together in class? Comments? Are we together? Am I communicated? Awesome. I see Zita, Abib. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, so let's go on with the types of origin of democracy. Okay. Now, if I asked everyone here what democracy means to them, part of the responses that I'm sure I will get will be a government of the people, the will of the majority, competition for political power, rights to voice your opinions, freedom to be part of any organization, equality, rights, and representation. Some people will refer to democracy as a free market, citizen action, as well as elections. So those are like the more popular terms or descriptions, expressions that come to mind when you think about democracy. But let's look at the origins of the word democracy. Now, the term democracy is derived from the Greek word demokratia, which was coined from the word demos, meaning people, and kratos, meaning rule, in the middle of the 5th century. So democracy, as we expressed earlier, is rule by the people. Demos for people, kratos for rule. However, even though the concept was thought to have been popularized around the middle of the 5th century, there is ample evidence that suggests that there were forms of democratic government well before that time, in the thousands of years when human beings survived by hunting and gathering. There existed, scholars assume that there existed various forms of democracy. As a matter of fact, democracy was the natural political system amongst these people, the hunter-gatherers, well before the 5th century, when democracy was thought to have taken root. So democracy already existed. It was the natural system of government amongst these people. In small groups, they organized themselves and had some people lead them, make decisions for the common good of the community, well before the 5th century, when it became a popular system of government. However, due to greater inequalities in wealth and military power between communities, together with a marked increase in the typical community size and scale, meaning that as communities started to grow, remember that when democracy started in those non-literate tribal societies, it was in small communities. However, as these communities expanded and became bigger, they became more difficult to govern through the usual system of government. And as the sizes of these different communities changed, the ones who now had more power in terms of, say, military power, now decided to exert dominance over the smaller communities. And that was what gave rise to the more hierarchical and authoritarian forms of social organizations, like we discussed, the monarchies, the aristocracies, the oligarchy, because community size became bigger and more difficult to manage in a very simple way. And then communities that had greater wealth, greater power, felt that those people there, they are not as powerful as us. What if we just go in and overrun them and force ourselves on them and, start to make laws for those people. So those many years when people operated in simple democratic forms gave way to years of monarchies and aristocracies and oligarchies. And then around 500 BCE, conditions favorable to democracy reappeared in several places, particularly in Greece and in Rome. And so those primitive democracies, the forms that they existed before, now gave way to more sophisticated forms of social organization as we have today. That democracy as we know it today started from around 500 BCE. The democratic forms of government with structure and order as we know it today actually started around that time. Now, what are the variants of democracy? Because there are actually different variants of democracy. The most popular categorization, the two popular categorizations, the first is direct or participatory democracy. And that is a form of government in which the citizen makes decisions for themselves instead of delegating power to elected representatives. It is described as the purest form of democracy. What readily comes to mind are referendums and petitions in which all voters can actually participate and decide their own lot. I'm sure many of us will remember 2014 when the people of Scotland voted whether or not to remain a part of the United Kingdom. In that election, 55% of Scottish people in that referendum voted to remain a part of the UK, while 45% voted to leave. So at the end of the day, Scotland remained, because 55%, of course, is the majority, remained a part of the United Kingdom. Another example is the Brexit. I'm sure many of us will remember that term, Brexit. In 2016, the people of Britain decided to vote whether or not to remain a part of the EU. And after that referendum, the Brexit referendum, 52% voted to leave, while 42% voted to remain a part of the EU. So, of course, the majority, again, carried the day, which led to the UK, the United Kingdom, pulling out of the EU setup, which is why when we talk of Schengen states today, the United Kingdom isn't part of it. That decision happened because of a referendum that took place, and the people themselves decided whether or not they wanted to be a part of the EU. Same as for the Scottish referendum, where the people decided whether they wanted to remain a part of the UK or for Scotland to become an independent nation. So that is an example of a direct or participatory democracy. It is thought to be the purest form of democracy because the people themselves are exercising the rights to either remain or to leave. Now, the other popular, looking at the broad categorization variant of democracy, is the representative or indirect democracy. It's the form of government in which legislation is enacted by representatives who are elected by the citizenry. Now, in contrast to what we just looked at, the direct democracy, majority of the people decide that they want few people based on whatever reasons, whether they are the most brilliant, whether they are the richest, to act on their behalf. So the minority is mandated to act on behalf of the majority, because the majority trusts that these people have their interest, their best interest at heart, and they know how best to administer the state for the good of everybody. So broadly speaking, these are the two major variants of democracy. Now, let us look at the comparative advantage of different forms of government. First, no association could maintain a democratic government for as long as we have had democracies in many countries of the world if majority of the people believe that some other government were better. I'll repeat that again. No society would be able to maintain democratic system of rule for as long as many countries have practiced democracy if the people thought that there was a better form of government. Now, don't get me wrong. This statement does not mean that democracy is the best form of government. But the idea behind it is that for democracy to have lasted this long, perhaps it offers more advantages when you compare it to other forms of government. I have my views, my personal views, as to whether democracy is should be the system of government in every country in the world. I have personal views, which maybe here or when we engage at other fora, I might express to you, and I'm sure some of you also have your views about democracy, and whether it should be the system, for instance, for a country like Nigeria or other African countries. At some fora, we probably will be able to argue the merits and demerits of the different types of government. But note that democracy wouldn't have survived or won't be the predominant system of governance if the people, most of the people, believe that other forms of government offered better. It may interest you to know that of the 195 countries that are recognized in the world, 195, because actually 193 are member states of the United Nations. Only Vatican City and the state of Palestine are exempt. But in all, there about 195 recognized countries of the world. And of this 195 or 193, depending on which data you are following, about 120 practice the democratic system of government. Whether those forms are pure forms or diluted forms or mixed forms is another topic. But 120 of 193 is about 60% of the countries in the world are practicing some form of democratic government. That means that most of the people agree that this form of government offers better benefits than other forms of government. You may argue otherwise, but let's see why people think that democratic government is a better system of government. One, it's thought to prevent rule by autocrats. Of course, we know places where a single person has monopoly of political power and can make decisions on a whim. There is the tendency for that person to go crazy and power drunk, and then to act in ways
Okay, we can't hear him anymore. It might be a network glitch. Let's hold on and see whether he could come back in a few. Must be a network glitch. It has thrown him out. Welcome back, sir. You're muted, sir. You're muted.
Oh, okay. Apologies. I guess that was like a break in my internet. I apologize for that. So let's go back to our presentation. Okay, so we were talking about the advantages, comparative advantages. Can we all hear me, just to be sure?
Yes, we can.
All right. Okay, so democracy is thought to guarantee fundamental individual rights. It's thought to allow for a relatively high level of political equality and better foster human development. And how do you measure human development? You look at the indicators such as your health, healthcare delivery, healthcare service delivery, education, access to legal representation, defense of human rights. Those are the different indices that you measure when you want to say a state is developing well. And democracy is thought to guarantee this more than any other type of government. Whether or not this is, a fact is a subject of debate. Some people can argue that maybe in communist countries, for instance, maybe in terms of social prosperity. I mean, this is not a personal view. This is just for debate. Maybe in terms of social prosperity, maybe other forms of government like communism guarantee prosperity for a larger number of people than democracy does, just maybe. But the reason democracy is considered a preferable system of government compared to others is because it is thought to foster human development better than other forms of government. And finally, of course, I already referenced it, is thought to provide more prosperity for citizens. Okay, so now, challenges of democratic governance. So in a democracy, like all other dominant forms of government, the actual governance may be influenced by sectors with political power, which are not part of the formal government. For instance, Nigeria, right? We say we practice a democracy. But then again, it is possible, and as we have had people claim at different times, that a cabal, and this cabal might not even be in government. It might be people outside of government that are actually dictating how things should work, even within a democracy. This is why I told you to keep in mind the different forms of government before. Remember, we talked about anarchism. Now, even in a democracy, you can have semblance of anarchism, a case where it seems like there is absolutely nobody in control and a state is headless, like a rudderless ship, moving without any captain steering it. Haven't we had times like that in Nigeria, that it felt like we did not have a leader, even in a democratic government? So that's to show you that democracy, in most cases, does not occur in a pure form. It is mixed with other forms of government. So you can have democracy and still have anarchism inside, mixed together. You can have democracy and still have oligarchy. In a democratic setting, you can have few people still calling the shots inside of a democratic government. You can have autocracy. Even within a government, one person is still calling all the shots. If you have, for instance, remember that in Nigeria, for instance, there are three arms of government. There is the executive, there is the legislative, and the judiciary. Each is supposed to be independent of the other. But if you have a situation where the judiciary and the legislative pander to the central government of the day, what you have, in essence, isn't really a democratic system. What you have is an autocracy. Because if the legislative arm of government and the judicial arm of government can't exercise any independence with regards to legislative or judicial matters, then it means that whatever the central executive government says is the law. And even though we claim that that is, a democratic setting with three arms, in practice, what it actually is an authoritarian or autocratic government disguised or packaged as a democracy. So all of this to say, while democracy has several advantages, as were highlighted in the previous slide, it still has its challenges. And in most places where it is practiced, not just in Nigeria, not just in Africa, in every part of the world, there are still external influences inside of democratic governments that make it an impure form of government, like a mixed form of government. Okay, now let's move on to the next concept, which is the concept of citizenship, the main theme of our class. Now, citizenship is tied to the idea of democracy. So democracy is the first name, citizenship is the surname. So it's like two sides of a coin. And this is, as popularized by a Latin American activist. Democracy, you can't talk about democracy without talking about citizenship. And you can't talk about citizenship without talking about democracy. They are two sides of a coin. Now, there are two concepts of modern day citizenship. And I would like us to start by looking at the very first one, which is the concept of citizens as users and consumers. Let me pause for a second before I go on. Can you confirm that you can hear me, class? Can we hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. So citizens as users and consumers. Since the 18th century, when the concept started to gain traction, that's the concept of citizens as users and consumers, debates around civil citizenship have been shaped by the understanding of the rights and responsibilities of citizens as defined by government, meaning that a model citizen, according to this concept, is one who displays trust and obedience. And this is because of the belief that ordinary people cannot make decisions for themselves. And so they should rely on leaders to solve their problems. So for many, many, many years, citizenship was more like dictated by the government of the day. The government of the day dictated what citizens should do within a geographical area or within a democratic space. It was the government that laid down rules, and a good citizen was one who followed the rules. Citizens didn't have a say in how, for instance, you decided who your leaders were, or how you allocated resources, scarce resources, to different needs, to solving different needs. Citizens had absolutely no say in how the government was run. And for very many years, this was the more popular concept of citizenship. However, over the years, advocates argue that the problem isn't that the people are politically incompetent or incapable of making decisions for themselves. It is the elites who are insisting on keeping power to themselves for selfish reasons. So it's not that the people don't know what they want. It's not that the people don't have the knowledge to make decisions. It is just a few people wanting to keep power to themselves for rather selfish reason. The belief is that more involvement by people in decisions affecting them, and this is the new concept. The more people are involved in decisions affecting them, the better government and the people's quality of life would be. So the concept moved from citizens as just people who do what they are told. That's the initial concept, as users and consumers. You know, everything you're told, everything is defined for you. You don't have a say. The concept shifted over time to citizens as shapers and makers. According to the Institute of Development Studies UK, new approaches to social citizenship seek to move beyond seeing the state as bestowing rights and demanding responsibility of its subjects. In doing so, they aim to bridge the gap between citizen and the state by recasting citizenship as practiced rather than given. Remember the other concept, it is given, the government dictates, but now citizenship is recasted as practiced rather than given, meaning you should have a say in issues that concern us. These other concepts of citizenship recognizes the agency of citizens as makers and shapers rather than as users and choosers or consumers. Okay, now, even though democracy, according to the definition, is the more popular form of government, because according to the definition that we looked at when we started, we said democracy means rule by the majority. And given the advantages, comparative advantages that we looked at earlier, democracy, more than any other form of government, is supposed to guarantee equality and universality, right? This in principle, this is what democracy is supposed to be. But in modern day citizenship, there are issues to contend with. The first of this issue, and we're talking about theory and practice, and the issues that emerge when you're looking at the theory of democratic system of government and the actual practice, and basing it on that principle of equality and universality, which democracy is supposed to guarantee better than any other system of government. Now, let's look at those issues. There is the issue of individual versus collective identity. Now, in this class, as I have seen, let me take a look at our names again. Okay, I see Oluwatoyosi, I see Idaibi Joseph, I see Maureen, I see is it Chalia? I see Miria. I mean, just looking at the names, I can tell that we are from different states and from different tribes. Now, in every state, and when I say state, I'm not referring to like a state of a federation. I mean a country, a people. In every state, there are different components. You have looking at Nigeria, for example, you have several tribes, the major tribes, Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, and several other ones. You have 250 ethnic groups. You have so many languages. And even amongst these people, you have different religions. So you have those who are Christians, you have those who are Muslims, you have those who are traditional worshippers. And then you also have male and females. And then you have the educated and the uneducated, the literate and the illiterate. And then, whether we like it or not, you have, it's an issue that we need to discuss today. For academic purposes, it's important that we discuss this issue. And I'm talking about sexuality. You have gays, apologies, that word is not the, it's more offensive these days. So you have heterosexuals, and then you have same-sex relationship, heterosexual relationships and same-sex relationships. Those are the more acceptable terms today. So it's important that we get the wordings right, because today certain words are considered to be offensive. And now the point I'm trying to make is, within the makeup of a state, a society, you have very many different groups, and you can identify issues that are peculiar to each of these different groups. So the Muslims have issues that are peculiar to them. The thieves, XIV, or Idomas, or the Hausas, the Kanuris, the Fulanis, the Edo, the Bibio, the Ishekiri, the Ibadan people, the different peoples that we have issues that are peculiar to them, issues that are also very important. Men have issues that are peculiar to them, issues that are very important. Women have issues that are peculiar to them, important issues. Christians have issues that are important to them. Muslims have issues that are important to them. All categories of people have issues that are important to them. The question now is, how do you, in a democratic setting, how do you guarantee the rights of an individual? And remember, an individual is this rainbow that I just described. Miria Kogi is, I'm guessing Miria is a lady. Miria is a lady, probably from Kogi State, from the name. She has, several, if we were to categorize, describe her, there are several different things that we can say: sex, religion, occupation, level of education, and this is one person. Now, how do I ensure that the rights, in protecting the rights of Miria, I do not upset or step on the rights of Oluwatoyosi? How do I do that within a democratic setting? Because democracy is supposed to guarantee equality and universality. So let me just go through what I wrote here. Some activists reject the concepts of universality and equality altogether. Even the validity of a rights approach, they emphasize that differences such as race and gender can never be reconciled. Other artists point out the advantage of using these universal rights as aspirations for change, despite the problems. They argue that the concept of universal rights gives legitimacy to struggles for justice. What this simply means is that even within a democratic setting, there are issues of rights that still need to be considered when you're looking at an individual and a collective. One of the examples I give when I teach this class is the baker in Colorado, USA. Remember, there was a time, I don't know if we're familiar with the story, a certain baker, I think the company is called Masterpiece Bakery, were approached by a same-sex couple to make a wedding cake. And this lady, because of her religion, decided that she was not going to make the wedding cake for this same-sex couple. What did they do? They dragged that to court, and the issue dragged for many years, eventually getting to the Supreme Court. Now, what were the arguments? Those people said they were being marginalized, or there was segregation because of their sexuality. She was refusing to provide this service to them only because they identified as gay or lesbian. But they have rights, right? Their argument is that they have rights because they are people. But then again, this woman identifies as a Christian. Does she not also have rights as a Christian to decide whom she should provide services to based on her faith? So democracy is thought to protect the rights of the majority and ensure equality. But even in democratic situations, there are so many differences. How do we reconcile all of these differences? Those are challenges that we need to really look at. And also look at us. Let's come down to more practical home situations. How many times have you found a man and a woman attend the same church? A Yoruba man and an Igbo woman. They are both, what are those popular roles in church? Let's say they are both ushers in church, and they get along very well. This Igbo man and this Yoruba woman, they are fine, peaceful, they work together. But then their children decide that they've fallen in love and they want to get married. These same people that work so well together in church, in spite of their different, tribes, when it now comes to the question of marriage between their children, all of a sudden, there is a gulf of difference. No, my daughter cannot marry an Igbo man. My son cannot marry an Hausa woman. And all of these different, segregations that we create. So how do we, even within a democratic setting, how do we marry individual identity versus collective identity? Those are very, 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 very key issues. I don't have the answers, but there are issues that we need to think of just for us to see that as good a system as democracy is thought to be, there are still many issues that we have to contend with. And then let me give this example, for instance. Several years ago, there was this senator, I think he was from Adamawa State. Now, this senator perhaps goes to the House and makes laws. And these laws are supposed to protect the rights of girls and women, right? But then this same senator goes into an adult shop to purchase something and then physically assaults the ladies who are selling there. How do you marry somebody making laws that are supposed to protect girls and women in public, and then in his private life, he's assaulting a woman? How do you sync that? What is the correlation? between, where's the consistency? Or many of us in our places of work, we are in places of authority, we can hire. How many times do we choose to hire somebody because that person is our kinsman from my state, from my church, from my club? How many times do we choose to hire people for things like that over actual merit? And I'm talking about all of us in our different spheres. How many times do we do this? So those are the critical issues in modern day citizenship that we need to discuss and find a way, because an ideal democracy should ensure that the rights of the majority of the people is protected. Now let's look at other issues. Okay, now I've dealt from the issue of individual to collective. The example I just gave now is private versus public life. How many of us are, right? In public, we give this image. I'm a priest. I protect people. I preach the gospel. I'm an imam. I look out for the good of people. And then in my private life, I'm molesting children. I'm molesting children that I'm supposed to be protecting. How do you marry that? My official public role and my private life. Or I come and I'm a model citizen outside. And then I'm treating my wife and my kids badly inside. How do we reconcile all of this? Because democracy should always ensure that what is happening in private and in public is in sync. And it must be that the rights of the majority of the people are protected. You can't be good here and then here you are something else. There has to be a synergy, sort of. Okay? I give examples here. Male-related problems due parental neglect, violence against women. That's talking about some of us men at home. In private, we're supposed to be, examples, shining lights to our kids, to the community. And then at home, we're beating our wives. We're abusive to our wives. We're abusive to our children. How are you being a model citizen? How are you ensuring the rights of your wife as a human being is protected? How? So those are questions. And then there are certain attitudes too that we sort of condone that propagates vices. For instance, one of the examples I usually give is Tunde Ednott, the blogger. He used to do something he called Smash or Pass. And Smash or Pass, he will put pictures of girls or ladies, and then it would ask the audience, the followers, smash or pass. In simple terms, would you sleep with this person or would you not? When somebody has such a platform that is so huge, and you use that platform to objectify women, what you do inadvertently is that you embolden people who feel that they have entitlement over women's bodies. And then you kind of enable the culture of rape, the culture of violence. What this means is that wherever we are, and we'll get to that in following slide, in whatever sphere that we are, we should ensure that the content that we're putting out is protecting people, the majority of the people, especially the more vulnerable ones, rather than putting them in situations where people will take advantage of them. And I will go to that in a bit. Societal context, issues in modern day citizenship 3. It's important to recognize that in different societies, what citizenship is seen as, what they appreciate citizenship to mean, varies. For instance, in South Africa, A person who is a good citizen is one who is fighting against racism. Now, of course, you know the history of South Africa and the apartheid and all of that. So somebody who is seen to be doing some work in that area is seen as a model citizen. In Russia, being a good citizen might be associated with economic liberalism and individual self-reliance is valued over collective action. And in countries like examples, South Sudan, Palestine, a lot of those countries that have had years of wars and conflict, a good citizen is one who seeks peaceful resolutions and reconciliation. So we're gradually getting to the end of our class. What makes a good citizen? Being informed and aware of social, economic, and political issues is very, very key. It's good to watch Big Brother and know the names of all the contestants and everything. By all means, I enjoy it sometimes too. It's good to watch Telemundo. It's good to watch Z World. It's good to watch K-drama. K-drama seems to be the rave now. It's good to watch all these things. Please continue to enjoy yourself. Life is short. But at the same time, make it a duty to keep yourself abreast of issues that are happening within your political space. For instance, if I ask many of you here, you probably know the name of the president. I'll give that to you. You probably know the name of the governor of your state. I'll give that to you. How about your LCDA, your local government? Do you know the name of your representative? How many of us our chest and say we know the name of our representative? I'm sure not too many of us. Those are aspects of our social life that we also need to take interest in. Get to know who your representatives are. Government is not just at the center. Government is also at the grassroots. In fact, in most parts of the world, it is the grassroots that the people feel the impact of government the most. It is at the grassroots that change, real change, can be made. So if we make it part of our, if we make it our duty to know who our representatives at the local level are, we can then make demands of these people because they are not there as figureheads, they're there as our representatives. So it's important for us to be interested in this issue. A lot of us say, after all, government doesn't do something for me. That, my dear friends, is what privilege is all about. Privilege is, it doesn't concern me. What they do doesn't concern me, but it concerns the other person. And whatever concerns your brother, whatever concerns your sister, indirectly comes back to you. So we can't just, make that excuse that we're not going to be interested because whatever they do does not concern you. It doesn't touch you. We need to show interest in these things. As we're showing interest in Nigerian Idol, in Big Brother, in, all of those other fun things that we do, it's important to also be aware of social, economic, and political issues. Wherever we are, and this is what makes a good citizen, in our own spheres of influence, we should foster tolerance and respect for human rights in all relationships and institutions and mediate conflict. We should take steps to combat disadvantage and injustice. I'll give you an example. A comedian comes on stage and his goal is to make people laugh. And then he starts to make jokes that are mocking people with Down syndrome or people with some form of challenge, health challenge, one health challenge or the other. Maybe people with polio or people who have difficulty walking. And then they start to make jokes mocking people, or people even stammer. And they make jokes mocking these people. And we laugh and laugh at them. Do we forget that these people are human beings like us and that they have rights like us? So instead of just laughing, and I'm talking when we are sitting with our friends at the beer parlor or when we are with other ladies at the salon and we're gisting about, what is happening, catching up on gist on the week, or we are on social media and we're talking about things. When these issues arise, what do? Do we just laugh like every other person and act as if the people that they are talking about aren't human beings like us with rights, people that should be protected under a democratic system? So these are challenges for us. A good citizen should be able to foster tolerance and respect for all human beings and take steps to combat disadvantage and injustice. We should speak for people who are vulnerable, people who can't speak for themselves. Sometimes my friends share stuff with me on Instagram, and if they share something that I find offensive to, for instance, women, I'll quickly say, guy, no pure, or guy, no, this one no good. Like normally some other people would laugh, and then we keep, you share it, the other person laughs, we laugh, and then issues that we should take serious, we laugh over it, and then we wonder why there's a lot of badly behaved men out there. We wonder why there's a lot of rape. We wonder why there's a lot of men who are entitled to, and I'm sorry that I'm always saying men all the time. I'm sure women do things to men too, but I'm saying when we keep quiet and laugh over things that clearly are detrimental to a certain segment of society, be they women, be they a particular religion or religious sect, be they people with several health challenges, like I mentioned, Down syndrome, epilepsy, or whatever, narcolepsy. When we keep quiet and laugh, what we're doing is we are emboldening the people who are doing this and perpetuating that culture of abuse. And we are stepping on the rights of these people as well. So good citizens should be seen to, it's not everything we laugh at. We call people out and say, no, this is not right. I remember when Cassie first came out and said that P. Diddy did XYZ. A lot of men went and said, they are trying to bring down black men. They're trying to destroy the legacy of black men. How far? Now when you don't see the video, how far? Do you still think they're trying to destroy the legacy of black men? My point here is when something is bad, it is our duty to call it out. And for us men, as for women, we should always hold one another to account. We can't just laugh at everything. We can't just make everything political. We can't make everything a war of men versus women. If a woman has done wrong and it is obvious, other women should call her out and not say because it's a woman, women supporting women, and you support bad behavior, like obviously bad behavior. Or you do, solidarity, bro code, and your fellow brothers are abusing women and you are doing bro code. Are you forgetting that your daughter might be the one that is being abused tomorrow? Because what goes around comes around. This is not a moral class. We're discussing citizenship and democracy, and it has to do with rights of people, which is why I am bringing out all of these examples. I'll rush quickly through the remaining points here of what makes a good citizen. We should promote collective action and a collective spirit. So if there are issues like we did during the NSAS, we all came together and we advocated for the ban of NSAS, and the government heard our voices. This is an example of collective action. We should participate in community and national affairs, engage in public debates. Yes, during elections, let's talk about issues. Let's talk about our candidates. Sorry, welcome to Nigeria. Power just went out, but it will be restored in a bit. They'll change the power source in a bit. So just to say that as a good citizen, you have to be actively engaged in whatever is happening in our national or political space and vote, register to vote. Some of us, like I said before, because of that privilege that we think we have, whatever is happening doesn't touch us. We decide that we're not going to be a part of the political process. When Good men do nothing. Evil people hold sway, and we are as guilty for the evil that they wreak on people as those people themselves when we keep quiet. So it's important for us to be part of the processes. And then we should promote, of course, participatory democracy, politics at home. Yes, this final point, and it's not very easy, even for me. Nigeria gives you a lot of reasons to lose hope. And that is the fact. Nigeria gives us plenty reasons to lose hope. But you see, there's no society that is not without its challenges. America, as we know, has major problem of gun violence, amongst other things. All the other societies that we have challenges. I know that you would say it's like comparing apples to oranges and all of that. I'm not by any means trying to say Nigeria is on the same level as any of these other countries. And I'm not telling anyone who decides to japa not to japa. If you are going to japa, just make sure that you have a very solid thing that you are going to be doing wherever it is you're going. Apologies about the light thing. It will be rectified shortly. It's such a huge distraction. Okay. So yes, the point I'm trying to make really is that we should have some level of hope, even if a teeny weeny bit. Because if we do not believe that change is possible, we won't act in a way that will bring about change. So we need to have that hope that things can and will get better and do our bit to bring about this change. We're rounding up in 2 slides. How to build an active citizen advocacy. Build public influence. I already talked about this. Within your flow of influence, do your best, do your bits to make sure that things that are against certain groups of people, that you stand up for those people. All those vices that people perpetuate against certain sects of people, stand up for them and let them know that these things are wrong. Within your sphere of influence, change is not going to come about only at the center from the government. No, all of us within our different spheres of influence, we have a role to play in bringing about change. So we must do that. We must also promote civic education and advocacy training, such as we are doing today with the Electoral College. I commend the Electoral College for this, this initiative. I want to see a situation where even not just in primary and secondary schools, even in our workplaces, in our churches, citizenship education becomes an important subject of discussion that people pay attention to. We need to do that. And then we need to pursue broad-based citizen action. When you have a single stick of broom, it's easy to break. But when you have a bunch, you remember that analogy, it's much more difficult to break. The same thing, when you have a lone voice championing a cause, it is good to have a lone voice, but it is better to have concerted efforts, because when we join our voices together, then we can actually get the people that matter to effect the changes that we want. So we should identify organizations that share the same goal, similar interests, similar visions, and together try to push for certain policies that are pro-people, or to get the government to reverse certain policies that are anti-people. We should use all means including the media. Media advocacy is a very useful tool to drive home our case. I'm always very happy when I see the executive director of Electoral Nigeria, not just ensuring that we have sessions like this, but seeing him on TV, talking about issues relating to democracy, politics, governance, good governance. We need to use all of these media, all of these outlets, every tool, every platform that we have, virtual, physical, to continue to promote ideals that ensure the rights of the majority of the people are protected. And remember, the most vulnerable when we do this. In conclusion, advocacy that is geared to building citizenship and reshaping political culture draws heavily on the theory and practice of participation and popular education. A new practice of citizen leadership requires an integrated strategy involving participatory education processes to build people's ability to analyze their reality and internalize their rights as citizens. It also takes new alliances, what I was talking about, and broad-based democratic organizations working together, as well as respecting and using people's differences. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our class. With the permission of our moderator, we can now take questions and comments if we have any.
All right, thank you so much. Oh, okay, I can see hands already. Akirili Peter, I would ask the admins to help unmute you or ask you to unmute so you can ask the question.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. The class was very insightful. My question is, when you were talking about challenges of democracy, sir,
Yes.
I realized you did not mention. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh yeah. You did not mention anything about nepotism, tribalism, and the rest, because I think this is as much as we may want to shy away from this is our reality, particularly as Nigerians, in a situation where I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, but let me explain. In a situation where in the last election, people forget social justice, forget character, competence, and all good criteria to judge a political leader, and voted for persons just because they are of their tribe, just because they are of their religion, just because they are blood relations. How do we move ahead of this? Because this is one of our undoing in this nation. We cannot deny that. We cannot at all deny that. How do we move ahead of this? How do we tell our people that? How do we orientate our people that this is not the right way to go? This will not bring about development that we need. How do we do that, sir? Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, Akirele Peter, for that question. I may not have used the words nepotism, tribalism, but I did allude to them when I was talking about us and how many times we do things because somebody is from our religion, somebody is from our tribe, from our social club. I use the example of, giving somebody a job or a contract based on reasons like this other than actual merit. I think the same thing applies also in the political space. So yes, I agree with you that this is a very, very big challenge. And the change that we want to see can only come if we within our spheres of influence start to do the right thing. It's easy for us to blame others. It's very, very easy to blame the government. Who really is the government? The government is a reflection of us, the people. I just talked about when I was talking about the issues in modern day citizenship, I was talking about individual versus collective identity, and I went to private and public life. How some people, and that some people could be me, some people could be you, how, we present as a certain person when we're in public, but in private, we're harming or abusing our wife. For me, I'm abusing my wife, or I'm maltreating my children. Or talk about a pastor shepherding people, preaching the word of God, preaching love and all of that. And then children, children that are entrusted to you, you are abusing those children, exploiting them sexually. So while it's important to hold government to account, we also need to look at ourselves, start from ourselves, and then the spheres of influence that we have. When our people are doing things that we know are not right, do we laugh at it? Remember those statements that we make, he's just been a boy. A child is doing something that we know is bad. Or a man, a grown-ass man is doing something. And we are saying, boys will always be boys. Boys will always be boys term is actually a term that, if we're not careful, will end up enabling bad behavior. So all of these changes that we wish to see, people voting for the right reasons instead of what they will get, or instead of tribal affiliations or religious affiliations and all of that. All of those will stem from us changing first and us educating. I took time to talk about the qualities of a good citizen. Part of those qualities is within our sphere of influence. I talked about Tunde Ednot, for instance, and his large platform. If instead of smash and pass, is actually educating people, these things that you mentioned, imagine how much possibility of change we can have through individuals like that. And I'm not saying it's only people like that that should do something. I'm still coming back to the individual. You and I also have a part to play. So yes, this is me saying, Akerele Peter, that I hear you. I agree with you that nepotism, tribalism are actually the bane of development in Nigeria. But the change will not come like automatically. It will start with us doing things right, starting with us and in our spheres of influence. And then we can move from us outside till it becomes like, a real movement. But it has to start from us. I hope that answers it. Okay, thank you, Peter. I see Ibrahim Jari.
Okay.
Can he go ahead, moderator?
I've asked him to unmute.
Okay,
Ibrahim,
yes.
okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Presenter.
Can Ibrahim Jari go ahead?
Yes, okay, good evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Presenter. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead. Yes, Ibrahim, I can hear you.
Thank you. Under variance of democracy, you mentioned two types: direct or participatory democracy.
Yes.
And indirect or representative democracy. Under direct or participatory, I gave an example of UK, that is during Scottish referendum and the EU referendum. But in my own opinion, I think they only this for special cases, because I know the UK has a House of Commons. In this House of Commons are the representative of the people. Then I want you to reconcile this with what you said on the uh, uh, this Scottish referendum and this EU referendum, because I think this is only done during a special case, because normally British practice representative democracy because they have the House of Commons who represent their people. Thank you very much.
Okay, very, very good point you made. So when I made that example, I was trying to talk about democracy and the purest form of democracy. The purest form of democracy is such that the people themselves, and this is for academic reasons really, the people themselves are part of the ones making the decision. And the closest examples to pure democracy are those, the referendums. It's not only in the United Kingdom. In Australia, I think at some point had a referendum, right? So a situation where the people are involved directly in making decisions about issues that concern them. That is what the direct form of democracy is. So this exists. It doesn't deny the fact that the UK has a House of Commons, which is also like a representative government. I was just only citing it as cases where democracy has been practiced in its purest form. Because if you go back to the definition of democracy, democracy, rule majority, it is ruled by the majority. So those were just examples of pure forms of democracy, not to say that the House of Commons doesn't represent the people. No, I'm just giving that example for academic purposes.
Thank you very much, sir. And under issues of modern day citizenship,
yes,
you mentioned Russia, South Africa, some other countries. Okay, what of Nigeria? Do you have any comment on Nigeria? Because charity begins at home. We have to know what is going on in Nigeria, sir. Thank you.
Okay. I used the example when I was talking about benefits. I think it was benefits of democracy comparatively, like when you compare it to other forms of government. And I was saying I did not think that democracy is, this is me personally, democracy is that every nation should practice democracy as the promoters, the West promotes it. That democracy is good personally, but it can be practiced in a way that suits more the culture or that suits the people more. For instance, Rwanda practices a democracy. But I tell you, the democracy that Rwanda practices, Kagame, almost, even though they have the parliament and all of that, Kagame almost has control over everything. And his country is progressing. Yes, you will find people talk about human rights issues, especially oppositions who are being targeted and all of that. But within the type of democracy that he has practiced, and this is not me making excuses, issues about human rights should be investigated. I believe nobody under the law should be treated unfairly under the law. Everybody should be equal under the law. But the point I'm trying to make is that the form of government that they practice, even though it is called a democracy, it is their own version of democracy, yet they're able to deliver real dividends. I visited Rwanda January of 2023, I couldn't believe the development in that country. Rwanda is really the shining light of Africa right now. No wonder it is the toast of many countries of the West. Rwanda is where everybody is going to site companies and all of that right now. A lot of partnerships with so many countries that will benefit the people are being initiated and negotiated by the Kagame government. And that is despite not practicing the democracy purely the way the West practices it. This is mean, I'm not advocating, I'm just saying democracy may offer, according to many, the best value comparatively, based on all of those things I enumerated. But can we as a people look more critically at this system and see how we can modify it in such a way that maybe, perhaps, I'm not saying there is a better way. I'm just saying perhaps there might be a way that works better for us in Africa or in this country than the way it is practiced in the West. This is just to tickle us, to get us thinking, because we should always be seeking what will achieve the best for the majority of the people. And I think in choosing a system of government to practice, you should look at the peculiarities of those people. You should look at their culture. All of these things should be part of the things that should inform the kind of system of government that the people practice. So I am neither here nor there. I'm just saying that this should be a subject for discussion. It should be an ongoing debate. We should constantly be seeking ways, systems, how systems can improve. It may be democracy, it may be another form, maybe a variant of democracy. We should always just be seeking ways where systems of governance can improve such that the good of the majority of the people is guaranteed, the prosperity of the majority of people, the rights, the welfare of the majority of people is guaranteed. I hope that answers it, Ibrahim.
Okay. All right. I have searched through the chat box. I've only seen comments. I haven't seen any questions.
Through the chat. Are there questions in the chat box or comments?
Oh, I didn't. There was one particular one when we're talking about being responsible as a citizen, and you were talking about men and women, so there was just some comments on that. But I have a question.
Okay.
And it had to do with, well, we're talking about citizens' participation.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Okay, I was talking.
Somebody said women do horrible things too. Feel it though.
Yeah.
Not arguing that. No gender has a monopoly. Or evil. Yeah. Sure. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
Okay. So I was talking with someone today, we're talking about citizens' participation. And the person made a statement, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, that don't we already have representatives in the legislature, meaning that why do we still need to participate in polls when we already have representatives who are supposed to be our representatives, basically ensuring that they're speaking our mind, they're doing things that will enable us live better lives. So the question is, do we as citizens still have to do, or how do you marry this perspective with, we already have our representatives who are supposed to be doing their bits on our behalf? What more are we expected to do as citizens? So that's my question.
Okay, thank you. So if we go back to the two concepts that we looked at earlier, citizens as users and consumers, and citizens as shapers and makers. I did say that we've kind of transitioned from that point where citizenship was thought to be something given to citizens by the government to a place where the people actually are have a voice and can, use that voice to ensure to advocate for their own good. Yes, we have representatives, but these representatives also need feedback. Your representatives are usually in for the states. They are usually at the state capital, and then few times. In fact, we have situations where some representatives, local government chairmen, for that matter, I'm not even talking House of Reps. I'm talking local government chairmen, do not even leave. I know of a case where a local government chairman lives in Abuja, but is a local government chairman in a Western state, but he lives in Abuja. How can real change come about when the representatives are not close to the people? So people participating and demanding things from their representative is a way to keep them accountable. It's also a way to give feedback because we are the ones living within the society. If there are potholes within these estates and all of that, it is us here who are feeling it. Our representative may not be living here. So we have a role to play in giving feedback. And this is the way democracy develops. It's that feedback mechanism. The difference between democracy and other forms of government is you usually do not have other views. You usually do not have contributions outside of those people in government, like the autocratic system of government. It is just that person, or the oligarchy system, where just a few people. But if everybody is sort of involved, it becomes a more representative government. Collective aspiration is put at the forefront as against individual aggrandizement or settlement of a few political friends, business associates, or cronies, which is why citizenship will always be, if you take away citizenship, then there is no democracy. And if we leave everything entirely to elected representative without any form of accountability, without any form of feedback, we will be shortchanged as the people at the end, which is why citizenship, as we started by saying when we're looking at citizenship, that citizenship and democracy are two sides of the coin. You cannot talk about democratic government and the dividends of democratic government without talking about citizenship. They exist side by side. So the role or office of the citizen, as far as the democratic system of government is concerned, is the most important role. And even when you have representatives, the feedback and the what do you call it? The check and balance that citizens play is part of the ways of growing democracy and making it a system that actually works for the majority rather than a few. So it would always be a very key aspect of democratic government. And it's important to keep encouraging greater participation of people in politics and democratic discussions. Okay. I hope that answers it.
It does. All right. Because initially I was just a bit torn, but I think you have settled that very well in my heart. Thank you very much. Do we still have anyone willing to ask a question? So I think our facilitator has done an amazing job with this. Okay. All right. I don't see any more hands and I don't see any comments in the chat box. Okay. So if there are no further questions, I believe we've done justice to democracy and citizens' participation, the roles that we play, and especially in this styled system of government. Thank you so much, Mr. Tony Usidame, for doing a brilliant job.
Pleasure.
For increasing knowledge in our hearts in these times. So on this note, I'd like to hand over quickly to our head of politeracy, Lisa, who can do the honors of thanking you properly. And our students, please give a thumbs up and a huge thank you in the chat box via emojis for the job well done and for receiving such value this evening. Him taking out time out of, I'm sure, his very busy schedule to do this. So thank you so much, sir. And we appreciate your time and the knowledge that you shared, hoping that we see more of you maybe in the next cohort. Thank you. It's over to you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Okay, if Lisa is not here, Chalia?
I see the comments. Thank you very much for the comments. It's my pleasure sharing, this few hours with you to discuss something that I am very passionate about. So thank you very much, class. Thank you very much to the organizers as well. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. All right, I'm looking for my head of politeracy, but she's not here. Okay, Chalia, do you have any final words before we call it a day?
I thank you very much, sir, on behalf of Electoral College, Division, and POTs. And also the students, thank you very much, sir, for the insightful class. And thank you very much, Shala, for the beautiful moderation this evening. So just a quick reminder that we have just 2 more weeks left to conclude. We have 2 more weeks to conclude class, these cohorts. So don't forget your projects and assignments to come in this week. Yes, thank you very much, everyone, and have a great night's rest.
All right, then. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you again. Bye-bye.